Welcome, it's Indisputable. I'm your host, Rashad Richey, good to be with you. We got a lot of stories to cover today. Breaking down news of the day, my contributor, attorney at law and legal analyst, Dina Sayegh Doll. And in my bullpen, the debate segment is with Jeff Charles, host of Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. That's a podcast. He wants to talk about left-leaning policies versus right-leaning policies and how they impact minority groups in the United States of America. Should be an interesting debate. First story of the day, a neighborhood in Michigan finally will allow black people to move in. Ann Arbor, yeah, you guessed it. Okay, there's a racial covenant in Ann Arbor, which means if you are not white, you cannot move in. That was actually on the deed, okay? So let me give you background to the story. A racial covenant in an Ann Arbor neighborhood deed was finally repealed by civil rights members and community groups. The restrictive covenant existed since 1947. Let's put up a picture of the community, okay? Now, you may be thinking, wow, Doc, that seems really, really unnecessary, right? And maybe this is just a one-off. Let's put up the map. You see, in the county, all of those sections that you see that are orange actually have racial restrictive covenants for their communities. Isn't that something? Ann Arbor's Hannah neighborhood had an illegal whites only policy that existed in the subdivision's deed. Now, here's why this is important. It was in the deed of the subdivision. The subdivision dates back to the 1940s. They did not bother to change it, to update it. Other movements have attempted to, it failed. This time it was successful. Now, here's why we talk about systemic and structural racism. This is by design. This was not by some organic thing that happened. This was literally somebody with a mind to actually discriminate against black people. And they wrote it in a policy, and it was adopted as bylaws, and it was coordinated with their charter, and it was implemented in their culture. It was by design. And the only way you can unravel something that exists by design is to intentionally destroy the design. You can't wait for something that has been designed to simply break down. You must intentionally deconstruct the construction. And that's why you see this movement happening with Ann Arbor. All right, story gets deeper. No different than there being a sign in the entrance to the subdivision which says whites only, said Michael Steinberg, the director of the Civil Rights Litigation Committee. Neighbors joined members of the University of Michigan's Civil Rights Litigation Committee to repeal the racist policy. The majority signed it and overturned it, okay? It's time that we examine our past. Examine how past practices have shaped our community and continue to shape our community and have impacted our residents, said Erica Briggs, an Ann Arbor City Council member. Well, you don't say, Ann. I'm glad you all are on the right side of this issue in 2020 freaking two. Good for you, Ann Arbor community. I want you to think about the systemic issues that have resulted in this particular policy and policies like it. They discriminated against black folks from being able to move into that community who were qualified by way of median income, etc. They said, oh, we don't care. You're black, we don't want you here. How do you think that shaped the population? How do you think it shaped the community? How do you think it shaped the politics? How do you think the politics then shaped the policies? How do you think those policies then shaped outcomes? See how it's all connected? Every bit of it. I'm happy that we finally made this change. I'm excited to see us kick this off for our community. Briggs said, I hope by the end of 2022 that we can see these restrictive covenants are gone across our city because they have many more, as I just demonstrated. We see this as an opportunity for neighborhoods to really affirm their values and to communicate that we are reckoning with this history. We are not erasing it. We are affirmatively stating all are welcome, said Nina Gerdes, a University of Michigan student attorney. The civil rights and community groups are continuing to work on repealing racial covenants in other Michigan neighborhoods too. Let me take you back to 1948. Shelley versus Kramer in 1948, US Supreme Court case held that restrictive covenants in real property deeds, which prohibited the sale of property to non-Caucasians, they said it's unconstitutional, that it violated the equal protection provision of the 14th Amendment. Now here's one of those instances where there's a policy, the Supreme Court ruling, let's call that a policy. That policy should have been universally adopted by every covenant community agreement in the United States of America. It's called reciprocation. But you see, culture ate that policy alive. See how that works? Culture eats policy any day of the week. The actual implementation of fairness may not be reflective of what's on paper. Attorney, what are your thoughts on this?
I agree. So this was left in the covenants, even though it became illegal after that Supreme Court decision. It became unenforceable. So I think here what I see what really matters is that words matter, right? We wouldn't be doing this, you wouldn't be doing this if what we say, how we communicate doesn't matter. So when these became illegal in 1948, a year or two after this was even adopted, the subdivision didn't change their language. And I'm sure many subdivisions around the country, you highlighted a bunch in Michigan, but this was nationwide, didn't change their language. And so they were still communicating that they wanted whites only. And that's what's so important. Even though it became unenforceable, they left it on their books. And that's a very strong message. People understand what they want. It's so good they are taking this off, even if it's been unenforceable for years, because it's also now a form of education for people to realize, hey, this was probably a really great new subdivision that at the time was limited to whites only. This is how progress was limited in our country. And it's good for people to know if they don't know how this happened.
Yeah, it was a racist subdivision created by a racist architect who said, okay, if you're racist, you can move here because our covenant says black people cannot. Now here's the other part. This is equivalent to, let's say, a restaurant still having a whites only sign. We know that's not legally enforceable, but technically they can put up a sign that says that and be covered under their freedom of speech and expression, as long as it is not enforced. So imagine being a black person walking up to a restaurant that still has a whites only sign, and they say, oh no, we just keep that around because that was one of the first signs we had when we established this store. See, it still shapes the culture of who goes to that restaurant if you do things like that. All right, next story. Proud Boys leader decided to punch a black woman and call her the N-word. This coward is here. Here it is.
Apparently. Bitch, shut your mouth.
He's trash. Let's put up his picture. I got some background to this fella. All right. His name, let me first start here. His name is Andrew Walls, but he's a leader of the far right group, the Proud Boys. Now we've talked about the Proud Boys many times on this program. Far right, deep connections to white supremacists. We've talked about this. He assaulted a black woman on Sunday. This was caught on the video. He was shouting racial slurs and then decided to punch the woman in the face. He's the vice president of the Akron Proud Boys chapter, all right? So here's how we're gonna do this. Let me go ahead and explain to you who he is first. He's 26 years of age, Andrew Walls. was reportedly drunk outside of an Ohio bar and was seen scuffling with other patrons while spewing racial slurs. So what you got on camera was not the full extent of what he did. At one point, his victim, a 23-year-old Cameron Morgan, passed by with a friend when she heard Walls and others around him screaming F-N words, okay? She's just walking by. Walls points his finger at Morgan, Miss Morgan, calls her the N-word, and then says, B-word, shut your mouth, and punches her directly in the face. According to Morgan's father, Walls also dragged her into the street by her hair, okay? This man was charged with possessing a firearm. All of that, he had a firearm while intoxicated and assault. A warrant was issued for his arrest. Walls turned himself in on Sunday evening. Morgan's injuries may lead to his assault charge being upgraded to a felony. Now I want you to remember, you just saw a felony in front of you. That was a felony act. They decided to charge him with a misdemeanor, okay? They may charge him with a felony. They may upgrade the charges. He could also be charged with ethnic intimidation. He has not been charged with that. That is a law that exists in that state. He has not been charged with that yet. This is not the first time we have seen Walls on the news. Here's him in 2019. Let's put it up. Okay. Andrew Walls, vice president of the Canton chapter of the Proud Boys, set up a display and talked to students before Democratic presidential candidate Beto O'Rourke rally came to that state on that campus. He was talking to students, okay? He had an open carry display, Kent State campus, September 2019. This was a counter rally. So now, you know, the Proud Boys would tell you in their literature that they are not a racist organization. They will tell you that they are not white supremacists. And then they will point to the handful of people of color who are actually part of the organization in order to provide protection and cover for their white supremacist and white nationalist ideas. But when things like this happen with their members, the Proud Boys, they do not release a statement saying we denounce what this person said. They don't come out, hold a press conference and say they denounce the language of one of their leaders. They provide cover for them. They protect them. See, it's real simple. The people who are recruited, who happen to be people of color inside of the Proud Boys organization, not only are you foolish, you're a pawn. And they're using you to protect their white supremacist ideology. You know exactly who you are. Attorney, why was this charged as a misdemeanor offense?
Yeah, it's sometimes prosecutors do this just to get something to stick, just to start the process, and they're still building their case. They're still collecting their facts. So I do imagine, well, for sure, an ethnic intimidation charge. I don't know why that wasn't automatically included because the facts are so obvious. The felony, the aggravated battery felony, maybe him kind of bringing her into the street, that depends on her injuries. I could see that being elevated too, and maybe that was why they kind of held off. I mean, it's so disgusting. Thank goodness this was on film. I think it was her father that filmed this, that they were able to see. And yeah, as you say, I mean, I can't imagine anybody not realizing what the Proud Boys are. They show by their actions and their words all the time how their racism.
And Ms. Doll, I want to say this about charges, all right? I'm from a place called Glenwood Road. Routinely, I saw members of my community being arrested, and every single charge they can imagine were allocated to them. They didn't say, well, let's charge based on what can stick and maybe we upgrade later. They charge based on what can't stick, what doesn't fit the crime, so that you can negotiate and plead down later and they get a win under their belt. Why is it that we see something very different in cases like this compared to communities that I'm from, where the exact opposite happens?
I mean, we've spoken a little bit about public defenders in our discussions. And I think that goes a little bit about that. And as you say, sometimes people realizing that they are not going to get support from their community. Prosecutors realizing, yes, charging this white man as racist as he is, they're going to get more flack if they overcharge him than maybe somebody from color who doesn't have support, who isn't going to have a very good lawyer, who's going to be easier to plea down. As you said, this is systemic, and these issues absolutely play a role into what the prosecutors. I mean, it's their own professional prestige that they care about at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think there's this presumption, as you said, that if there's a black individual, that person does not come with the same level of community support as, let's say, a person connected to the Proud Boys. So you already know the person with the Proud Boys. You got community support, even though it's a bunch of racist individuals. You got community support, you got a lot of scrutiny, and you have the potential of them raising a lot of money to defend the case. The problem with that is based on a racial dynamic rather than what the person has actually done, right? So it's not fair in the legal context to lightly charge an individual because you are afraid of their racist friends. All right, speaking of racism, there's racism in the Ukraine. There are racist Ukrainians. So let me do it this way, because I think people will blur the lines. I'm anti-war, but as my grandmother would say, I got plenty of walking around sense. What Putin is doing in Ukraine is wrong, it's morally wrong. What some Ukrainians are doing to black people inside of their country is wrong as well, and racist as hell. Now, reporters who are reporting on this are also showing their extreme racism in how they contextualize European countries. And I'm going to break all of this down in real time. Let me take you to the first video.
Now with the Russians marching in, it's changed the calculus entirely. Tens of thousands of people have tried to flee the city. There will be many more. People are hiding out in bomb shelters. But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen. So it's partly human nature, but they are not in denial.
I'm sorry, it's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles and his helicopters and his rockets.
And so, of course, I understand and respect the emotion. What you are outlining there is this tension between longer-term efforts to apply pressure to Vladimir Putin, such as financial sanctions, and the very immediate military threat which you're experiencing.
Just to put it bluntly, these are not refugees from Syria. These are refugees from neighboring Ukraine. I mean, that, quite frankly, is part of it. These are Christians, they're white, they're very similar to people. I mean, people who live in culture.
Now the unthinkable has happened to them. And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
This is Europe. These are good Christian white people. I mean, they're civilized, as the first reporter said. It's not like Iraq. These aren't refugees from Syria. They should be ashamed of themselves. They are human beings. Bias, prejudice, systemic racism on display in international journalism, and you just saw it. Remember, one lady said, they're white Christians, as if somehow their lives, because they happen to be white or belong to a particular religious category, their lives are much more sophisticated and valuable than those who are not. Now, they may not see it that way because their bias could likely be implicit. I don't give a damn which one it is. The impact of it is the same. The impact of hyper-aggressive bias and implicit bias is the same for the person on the other side of the bias. Those were just a few clips. Let me give you some more background. All right. Cities under siege across the Ukraine are home to tens and thousands of African students studying medicine, engineering, and military affairs. Morocco, Nigeria, and Egypt are among the top 10 countries with foreign students in Ukraine, together supplying over 16,000 students, according to the education ministry. Thousands of Indian students are also trying to flee. What was meant to be a cheaper alternative to studying in Western Europe or the United States has turned overnight into a war zone as Russian tanks, planes, and ships launched the biggest European invasion of another nation since World War II. With flights grounded, African governments thousands of miles away are struggling to support their students. The students Reuters spoke to said they have had no help from home. I'm gonna give you more to this. Now, we have video, we have seen images of Ukrainians stopping Black travelers from getting on trains, stopping their movement in favor of whites. We have seen this. We have also seen the Twitter feeds of individuals who are giving us updates as they come. This is racist. Now, here's what's going to happen. You see, Putin is well aware that the international community is against what he's doing, by and large, okay? Obviously, there's some exception. He's going to use this against Ukraine, and it will continue to be a public relations nightmare. It's a war inside of a war. The race dynamic or the racial injustice is the war that has already been there before this war started, because racism is a global dynamic, not simply contextualized through the American experience. And if the leadership of Ukraine, if they don't step up and denounce what Ukrainians are doing, you will see other nations, especially those connected to Africa, they will start not supporting the Ukraine fight against Russia. That will happen. There's more. Here are some stories shared across Twitter. Stephanie Haggerty said, a Nigerian medical student at Poland-Ukraine border told me she has been waiting 7 hours to cross. She says border guards are stopping Black people and sending them to the back of the queue, saying they have to let Ukrainians through first. Dr. Alakija, Black Africans are being treated with racism and contempt in Ukraine and Poland. We cannot ask African nations to stand in solidarity with them if they do not display basic respect for us, even in a time of war. Ignored in a pandemic and left to die in a war, unacceptable. Now let's get back to some of the coverage, all right? The racist coverage that you just saw. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Charlie D. Agata apologized Saturday, saying for suggesting the war in Ukraine is particularly shocking because the country is relatively civilized and European compared to Iraq and Afghanistan. His characterization was among a flurry of similar commentary in the media that critics have slammed as racist and in some cases, historically inaccurate. So let me tell you one case where it's historically inaccurate. My first PhD, finished in 2016, talks about the warfare that has been waged across this globe in the name of religion. The number one colonizers and the number one catalyst for warfare are white people, white nations. That's not my opinion. That is a fact. And you can find all of my research and go to Google Scholars, Amazon, is all published, all right? So that's one inaccuracy for sure, that somehow white nations are just too civilized for warfare. D. Agata responded to the criticism during a Saturday report saying, and I quote, "I spoke in a way that I regret, and for that I'm sorry." He said what he'd been trying to convey was that Ukraine had not seen war on this scale in recent years compared to conflicts he'd covered in other parts of the world. You can do that without using tropes, all right? this is extreme. There are so many more examples. Ms. Doll, okay? When you heard this kind of reporting, when you saw it, I know this had to hit you too. What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, my father's family is from the Middle East, and hearing, first of all, the reason why there's decades of war there is because we started that war. And her description, it was heartbreaking that the Syrian refugees were turned away in Europe after what they were going through. And her description of them was just wrong. They were actually highly educated in Syria. And so we mischaracterize the Middle East over and over and over. And in terms of global racism, I think you're absolutely right. I've always thought that, actually. I think in some ways, we just talk about it more here. We have freedom of speech, we have democracy, and we're able to have these conversations. But perhaps we have less racism here than in other places. And so I'm glad that you're bringing this up. And it is during terms of war that the most vulnerable of any community gets impacted the most. So it's really such a bad situation that they're in, and I'm really so sorry for that.
We stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters who are being discriminated against. We stand up for historically marginalized communities. We make absolutely no ambiguity about that. I also must echo the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he stood against the Vietnam War. And he said, when America is at war, it has a way of desensitizing those in the country, because the policies that we're fighting for take a back burner during wartime. So I want everyone to be reminded, we have a war right here in America that we're fighting on the social front every day. Don't lose focus of that as well. We got more on the other side. It's indisputable. Stick and stay.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, I don't know, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years,
right,
believing that it was actual berries. Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries, because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There is only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I've seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he's the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com. We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Welcome back to Indisputable. We got a lot of show left. Let's get to it. Before I read the comments, let me remind everyone, J.R. Jackson, The Watch List, great show. Make sure you check it out live, all right? Live weekdays, 12 p.m. Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Find out stories you need to be paying attention to in news, politics, culture, current events, sports, and more. This is a 10-week test series on TYT. Make sure to support JR by watching live daily. And don't forget to subscribe and follow youtube.com/watchlist-TYT and facebook.com/watchlist-TYT. Also, TYT is covering the President Joe Biden State of the Union address, and we'll be providing regular updates of the Texas primary, Tuesday, March 1st. Join the crew, all right? That's starting at 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific time. TYT.com/live. Canvas 2022. Big deal, all right? Make sure, I want you to log on, go to TYT.com/Canvas 2022 and the petition. We've been talking about this petition as well. Shouldn't even be a thing. We should not have to do this. But governments across America, they are now taking the DNA of rape victims, victims of sexual assault, putting that DNA in a database for potential future prosecution of that individual, all right? Likely unconstitutional, obviously immoral, doesn't need to happen. We already have enough issues with the underreporting of sexual assaults in America. Sign the petition, TYT.com/petitions, TYT.com/petitions. Okay, Ann Arbor. Lynn says, shame on all people who chose to reside in Ann Arbor. By that I feel. Mickey C, the Silverhead Dragon. I'm glad for that story on Ann Arbor's deeds forbidding sale to black people. Looked it up, put it in my face for more ammo for fighting the racists who insist there's no systemic racism in the world. There's no such thing. We had a black president. All right. Lynn says Proud Boy is right. He is certainly not a man. That's correct. Craig Souffle says, amen, Dr. Richie. I'm not dissing what's happening in the Ukraine, but I didn't see the same kind of public outpouring of global solidarity, not even in the US for the Haitian refugees. I'm also just putting this out there, but this sounds eerily like how the mostly passengers were treated on the Titanic. I got you, yeah. All right, Martin says, can I believe that was still being enforced seriously effed up? Remember, not enforced in law, you couldn't enforce it in law, but definitely there was an enforcement de facto in culture, all right, in culture. That's the issue. Okay, Ladies and gentlemen, I wish a Karen would.
You want to call the police on them for having a barbecue on a Sunday.
You're still free. Back off.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
Help me, but you're trespassing. You are trespassing. You're right. I hope they arrest you.
I do not hope they arrest you. I hope you come to a clear mind.
Heard me? They report Tuesday. Maybe they'll arrest me. Oh my gosh, lady. She just won't. You're right. She won't leave, and I don't know. He should leave.
This is not a great
How am I supposed to do that?
And we're after us. Like you weren't invited.
Okay, so we can just go waiting. All you have to do. Yeah. You can just walk downstairs. Let's go. She lives downstairs. What's downstairs? No, we're on trespass.
Yeah, let's go.
You want to lead the way? Let's get the police involved. I really think they should come.
We already called them.
Karen on Karen criminal activity here. So let me give you some background. This happened a few weeks ago, all right? This was at a Galantine's party, all right? I'll let Ms. Doll explain that. This Galantine's party where a group of young ladies got together to enjoy themselves. Well, according to Poochie, who did make a post about this, Poochie said they were Poochie girl. She said, well, we were having a party, and then all of a sudden, this particular Karen just walked in, sat down, and she said, obviously she wasn't supposed to be at the party based on her attire. And they approached her and said, hey ma'am, what are you doing here? And then the Karen started complaining about the noise. And they said, well, listen here, you are trespassing. This is illegal. You have come and just sat down on our couch. This is not your property. And she then started to record them and saying, I would like the police to come. The Karenicity runs deep in this one. Ms. Doll, what is this here? Is it breaking and entering? Is it criminal trespassing? What did this Karen do based on your observation of her walking into somebody else's home?
Other than just completely waste her time. I mean, she has nothing better to do. I don't think the door was locked, so maybe not breaking and entering, but yes to trespassing and also an invasion of privacy claim. She's recording them in their home. You have an expectation of privacy in your home, so they could have a claim for her there too. But bottom line, I'm watching that and I'm like, do you really not have something better to do? Like, tell them they're loud and go back home, do something better.
Yeah, according to the narrative, they did not press charges against that particular Karen. Should have. Okay, Marjorie Taylor Greene, United States Congresswoman, was the keynote at a white nationalist rally. Here's a video.
And now they're going on about Russia and Vladimir Putin is Hitler, and they say that's not a good thing. And can we give a round of applause for Russia? Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. We are honored, we are humbled and excited to welcome to the stage right now for our first speech, and we love to get to know her much better. I think this is going to be the beginning of something great. The representative from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Okay, she's coming. I got more video. Now remember, Fuentes, who is one of their leaders, Nick Fuentes, proud white nationalist, makes absolutely no bones about it whatsoever. He introduces Marjorie Taylor Greene. Right before, what do? They engage in a go Putin. They are celebrating Russia. They are dissing Democrats, okay? That happened a little before his introduction. But here it comes again. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene at the pro-Putin, pro-Russia, pro-white nationalist rally.
Many of you in this room knows exactly what that feels like because you know what it's like to be canceled And that's why I'm here to talk to you tonight. I don't believe anyone should be canceled. I don't believe in separating people and identities. I don't believe in separating people in classes. But that's what the Democrats believe in, because that's what Marxism is.
The irony. I don't believe in separating people, but that's what Democrats do. You realize you're separating people, and you're talking in front of a white separatist organization. That's what they believe in. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Okay, I got background. What state do you think this happened in? You guessed it, first time, Florida. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene spoke at a white nationalist conference in Florida Friday evening. Greene, a QAnon conspiracy theorist and an anti-trans Republican, was the surprise speaker at the 3rd annual America First Political Action Conference in Orlando, organized by white nationalist figurehead Nick Fuentes. That's the guy you saw introducing Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now here's the thing, they're not hiding it anymore. Be very clear about where we are now. They are not hiding the fact that they are white supremacists any longer. They are now out in the open. They have a champion, Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump has created other champions of white supremacy. It gets deeper. Fuentes, an anti-Semite and racist who attended the deadly 2017 white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, remember that, and who was recently subpoenaed for his involvement in the January 6th terrorist attack against the United States Capitol, excitedly introduced the Congresswoman as the featured speaker inside of the Marriott Orlando World Center, according to a live stream of the event. Now here's why I pause and say the Marriott should be ashamed of themselves, okay? I'm giving the Marriott about a day or two to make a response, and then we'll do a follow-up. But the Marriott at this point has to know this is what happened on your watch. There's more. In her speech, Greene referred to the assembled crowd, among them prominent right-wing extremists who have been photographed giving the Nazi salute and reciting the infamous 14 words, a white supremacist slogan, as canceled Americans. Well, damn it, if you're racist, you should be canceled. That was the whole movement of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now remember, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene will go around quoting the words of Dr. King. Dr. King literally died, was killed, was assassinated for trying to cancel racist ass white people and those that supported them. He was assassinated for that. And now Marjorie Taylor Greene, who quotes Dr. King on a regular basis, is now keynoting one of their conferences. Where are the Republicans? Where's the leadership of the conservative movement? Hell, where are black conservatives at? Get a backbone, damn it. You don't have to agree with me or anyone else politically. But if you all can't stand up, I'm talking specifically to black Republicans right now. If you all can't stand up to this, you're worthless, you're cowards. This woman is keynoting a white nationalist rally. You ain't invited, black conservative. You couldn't walk up in there. There's more. She said, you've been handed the responsibility to fight for our Constitution and stand for our freedoms and stop the Democrats, as if Democrats are not Americans, who are the Communist Party of the United States of America. This is called radicalization, okay? She wants them to look at Democrats, left-leaning individuals, liberals, progressives, as less than human. Because if you can do that, the same ideology will set in that existed during the era of slavery. You know why those white slave masters could still go to church and pray to a God? Because they taught that black people were not actually human beings, and they had no moral dynamic connected to them as it related to the treatment of black folk, because they weren't actually human, according to their doctrine. As he began, I'm talking about Trump now, former President Trump after she keynoted this white supremacist rally, former President Donald Trump gave her a shout out during his speech the next day. Where was he at? As he began a rambling speech at the 2022 Conservative Political Action Conference, where? Orlando, Florida. I mean, damn, they got the same contract, obviously. Trump included Greene in a list of Republicans he highlighted. He also included Matt Gaetz and the MyPillow CEO, Mike Lindell. You know, if you're decent, you stand up to this. If you're decent. All right, I know I called out black Republicans in particular. There's a reason for that. But if you are a decent individual, you call this madness out and you call it out quickly. Ms. Doll, thoughts?
The fact that Trump highlighted her the next day shows why she did it, power. Yep. And it's why a lot of the Republicans are not speaking out, because they are worried about their own power. And let's remind them, they are public servants. And the vast majority of the public finds this awful and does not agree with this. And there are too many people that we are voting in that only care about whether or not they're gonna get reelected, whether or not Kevin McCarthy is not calling her out because he just wants to be Speaker of the House if they regain the House. We have to somehow elect people who are in it for service rather than their own good. Otherwise, nothing will ever change. And just really quickly to your point about the Marriott, Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to hold a rally in Orange County, California, and they couldn't find a venue. Venue after venue canceled them, and they ended up having to do something small outdoors.
I remember that.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The Marriott has a responsibility here. Any corporation who's willing to give white nationalists a stage is participating in it.
That's right, and the Marriott cannot claim that somehow they are bound by policy and rules. They are a private company. They have the right to refuse contractual service. They do not have to allow anybody upon their property. All right, we got more on the other side. It's indisputable. Stick and stay.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover, so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories.
We play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
Any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media is mostly AWOL. They, along with the government and many other cherished institutions, have been captured by corporate interests. Audiences sense that they're not getting the whole story or even the truth from once trusted outlets, whether broadcasting cable TV news networks or national newspapers and magazines. The antidote is the Young Turks. Unlike mainstream corporate outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma, and we don't carry water for the Republican or Democratic parties. So watch us Monday to Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and join the thousands of progressives around the globe who tune in every day for TYT's unmatched, award-winning content and see what it's like to experience a news organization that only answers to you.
I'll continue to sit. I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed.
The president labeled him a son of a bitch.
I don't think it's good to be a distraction to your team.
To stand proudly for the national anthem.
You know, some of these people need to move to another country.
Well, you shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country.
The president is put in place to amplify the racists in this country. Black men and boys are killed at an exponentially higher rate than white men and boys, as outlined by PBS. Black people are most likely to be killed by police, found mappingpoliceviolence.org. Personally, my biggest gripe is not seeing how sports and politics have been attached at the hip. From the jockey syndrome, to the Negro Leagues, to Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Muhammad Ali, to modern day and everything in between. This is not an escape. It is a reflection of reality and a reflection of the times.
Dog on the White House lawn, would that be?
Everything that we've accomplished over the years is because of our members who've allowed us to remain independent of corporate interests and reach 20 million followers. Now is the time to bring as many people into the progressive movement as possible. We're inviting you to be the change and help bring a community-powered progressive change machine to life. Details are at tyt.com/change. If you're a member, thank you. We need you to remain so. If you're one of the thousands of viewers out there who's not a member yet, the time has come for you to join now. We need you more than ever. tyt.com/change.
All right, sorry about that. Welcome back. We got a lot of show left. Before we get to the next segment, let me read a few of these comments. I can only read a few. Nasty Habits, Nasty Dragon says, oh my gosh, she has absolutely no idea what Marxism is. Of why would she? Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. She has no idea what it is. In fact, she would say something silly. Twitch. Agnostic Sister says, what is she about? That she wasn't invited? Well, we know why. You're Karen. Terry Barrio, yes, let's cheer for a dictator racist against a country struggling to be democratic. And here's the thing, everybody. There's an assault on democracy, both here and abroad. From big lives to big tanks, there's an assault on democracy. Democracy is truly an ideology. It's a value system. It says we would like to govern based on majority consent. That's a decent idea. Not perfect, but a decent idea, right? That idea is under assault. Okay. Very sad story. An autistic child was beaten in front of administrators at a school, and they did nothing to help him. Just put up his picture. Okay, he's 11 years old. He has non-verbal autism. He does not speak. He was beaten up by a fellow student as school staffers stood, watched, and did nothing. We got video. His name is Sakai. The staffers were teacher aides at Jones Middle School in Humboldt, Texas. They are no longer employed at the school. According to the district, they should be arrested, according to me. The intellectual capacity of this young man is of a 4 or 5 year old based on his spectrum, okay? He has already missed multiple days of school due to the attack, is being evaluated by medical professionals. Let me show you one of the screenshots of the fight. This happened on January 25th. These are stills from the video footage. It was obtained by KHOU 11. Sakai is in the blue shirt and the student attacking him is in the gray, okay? Sakai was thrown to the floor by a much larger special needs student after Sakai accidentally bumped into the student while the students were leaving PE. The focus is not the student. The student repeatedly kicked him and Sakai crawled along the floor. At least one adult can be seen in the video watching the fight and letting it happen. Let's go to the next graphic. Okay. After Sakai got up, the student punches him to the floor again. There's an adult, a member of the faculty, who does nothing. At one point, the staffer taps the student on the shoulder, but the child continues to kick Sakai without the adult ever intervening. The only reason why this story has come to light is because the grandmother, Vida Cavett, decided to make the video public. Let's show a picture of grandmother, okay? She has full custody of this young man because his parents died. She took custody of her grandson following the passing of his parents when he was a baby. She spoke to the local news affiliate and said, and I quote, "Those adults in that video stood there. They did not attempt to help my child get up off the ground. They did not offer him any assistance. They didn't even check to see if he was injured." Ms. Cavett says she simply could not pull Sakai out of the school because it would be too disruptive. So instead, felt it was time for those who failed to protect him to go. They serve no purpose here. They serve no purpose here. They cannot do their job, according to the grandmother. Cavett and advocates called on the Aldine Independent School District to fire the aides. How can other special needs mothers send their children back to this school knowing the same paraprofessionals are standing in the same classrooms? In a statement on Thursday, the school district announced the 3 aides had been let go. They said, and I quote, "The district no longer employs the aides present during the incident. This incident should have never occurred. The district trains paraprofessionals in nonviolent crisis intervention techniques at the beginning of each school year and will reinforce that training during the remainder of this year." You don't have a training issue, school district, you have a cultural issue. You have more than one adult who allowed this autistic child who could not talk. Think about how evil they are. Think about how evil these paraprofessionals are. Because the child can't talk, they allowed this to happen. It was sport to them. They need to be arrested. This is not enough for me. Them being fired is not enough for me. We don't have the names of the paraprofessionals, but I was able to locate the names of the people in charge of that institution. And I'm gonna give you those names right here, okay? The principal is Lorena Shavira. The superintendent is Dr. Latanya M. Goffney, okay? Those are the people in charge. We are calling for the arrest of the faculty members, the aides, who allowed this to happen. Ms. Doll, am I out of line here?
No, and in fact, we just saw the officers that were involved with George Floyd's death being convicted for violation of the civil rights for their failure to intervene. And that's what makes me think of this case, that there's some federal civil rights for their failure to intervene. It was definitely, in your custody, in your care. This boy was definitely in their care. Children are most vulnerable and are so dependent on the adults and their school, and they clearly failed to intervene. Perhaps also some sort of accessory to an assault charge for them standing and being complicit and not intervening as well. And I just wanted to say, I enjoy doing this show so much in part because of your capacity to empathize, Dr. Richey. And this story is incredibly sad, and I'm so glad that you're bringing it to light.
Thank you. All right, You know, these stories get difficult sometimes, but they are important to highlight. And the small inconvenience that I have to go through because of how these stories impact me does not compare to the experience of the victims that deserve a voice. School officials have arrested multiple teachers, administrators, again, put up the mugshots. Now, we just covered something like this, okay? This is in Midland, Texas. Police announced that 4 school administrators had been arrested for failure to report with intent to conceal abuse. From left to right, let me read who these individuals are. Todd Freeze, MS and US Dean of Schools, of Students. US History teacher Shelby Hammer, head of school. Crystal Myers, head of middle school. And Adrian Clifton, assistant head for administration, director of admissions, okay? Their bonds were only set at $5,000 according to jail records. Now let me tell you what they did to this particular student, okay? The investigation is ongoing. According to the arrest affidavits obtained by News West 9, a female student under the age of 14 was reportedly sexually assaulted multiple times going back as far as September 2019. Years of abuse. The victim told an interviewer at Midland Children's Advocacy Center in February that she had been assaulted every other day for around 4 months while at the school. The suspect, who has not been identified but appears to be a fellow student based on information within the affidavits, reportedly began touching the victim's leg when the teacher stepped out of the classroom before beginning to touch her in other places. She tried to ask for help from another student who reportedly laughed at her. After this incident, the student broke down and told a friend, who then reported the incident to the dean of Trinity, later identified as Freeze. The victim later told that person another incident had occurred in front of cameras in the gymnasium. Now you got evidence, right? She also told Freeze she was scared of the suspect due to his difference in size compared to her. They told her they would check for the camera footage, okay? The affidavit continues to describe the multiple sexual assaults the victim faced, including him groping her and forcing her to touch him inappropriately. The victim's parents decided to contact Freeze by email. However, this person claimed to Midland police that he did not receive any such email. The parents then went to Trinity to discuss it in person, who said that he had interviewed the suspect and downplayed the incident, calling it a he said, she said situation. Eventually, the parents had enough and confronted both him and Myers, who would tell the parents they work on it, while Hammer claimed to be unaware of the incidents. Here's the cover up. This is the cover up. When COVID hit, it would provide only relief, temporary relief for the victim, because the victim missed school. But after returning to school, the parents removed the victim from the school. There's more, September 2020. Hammer sent out a waiver to the victim's parents that would settle the dispute about the assaults. According to the affidavits, the waiver would allow the parents to receive a portion of the tuition paid for the school year 2020 to 2021. That's called bribery. If they signed and avoided litigation or admission of liability or wrongdoing. The parents reviewed the document, hired an attorney before ultimately deciding not to take away the victim's right to speak out about her assault. Put up the picture of these monsters again. They have been arrested. Okay? Now, just last week in Midland, Texas, we covered another story about these 5 school staffers. Once again, private Christian academy in Texas, they are facing felony charges over accusations they failed to notify authorities after a 9th grader was sexually assaulted by an older student at the school. Okay? Where's the legislation? Where's the movement from Republicans and Democrats to create legislation around these issues inside of school buildings? Republicans still want you to think that critical race theory is the greatest evil that can happen in K through 12 education. It's not even taught. But you know what really is happening in K through 12 education? Those monsters. Are they fighting? Are elected officials fighting at your legislature to make sure monsters like this cannot coexist with our children? Or are they busy telling you that critical race theory is somehow the worst thing that has ever happened inside of the school system? It's a fairy tale. Ms. Doll, thoughts?
First of all, that 14-year-old was incredibly brave to be able to go and report it. And the fact that that was her response is tragic, really. I've wondered why, the Me Too movement did such a good job in this country of bringing these things to light. But it did not involve students at all in the Me Too movement. And I think it is huge. I think it's as rampant, the amount of sexual assault cases, students, involving teacher, student, and it was completely left out of that conversation. And I think it needs to become a conversation. Again, children in these schools are vulnerable. You can't quit your school like you can quit a job, and you're not even an adult. I think that they are put in a position so much worse in terms of sexual harassment, and they face it. Students are facing sexual harassment, and we need, like you said, it's not being talked about at all. They need to create a Me Too movement just for this area of women and men.
All right, this is why people don't like the police. A cop kills a black man, he gets convicted of killing the black man, and then the judge makes an unprecedented move and allows him to go home after the conviction, citing that he can set a second bond for the appeal, so he serves no time. Put up the picture of the cop who was convicted of killing an African-American male. This is former Kansas City detective who was convicted of fatally shooting and killing a black man. He will remain free on bond because there is an appeal to the conviction. But he is right now a convicted murderer, and the judge did something that this judge has never done in the history of his judicial service. The detective's name is Eric Deval Kinnar. He has not spent a single day in jail. After a 4-day trial, found him guilty of second-degree involuntary manslaughter and armed criminal action in the 2019 killing of Cameron Lamb. Let's put up Mr. Lamb. That's Mr. Lamb. That's the man he killed. Remember, you don't just kill a person, you kill their lineage, you kill the children he would have had, the young people he would have mentored, the lives he would have touched. You take a piece of the people that he already touches away. There are people that will never be the same because that young man was murdered by a cop, okay? Let's put up a picture of the judge. Jackson County Circuit Judge Dale Youngs, who convicted this detective, allowed him to stay out of jail on a $30,000 bond. Says he would not have to endure incarceration even after his sentencing on Friday, March 4th, because Youngs ruled this week that the ex-cop can remain free while he appeals his conviction. The judge maintains that he can remain free because he doesn't believe he will run. He knows he is going to jail. Okay, I looked up the law. It is allowed. Judges don't do it for murderers. You get convicted of murder, they don't use that law. This judge had never used the law, been on the bench 13 years, never did it. What am I missing here? What am I missing? Yeah.
Okay, you're not missing anything. I mean, you're absolutely right. This is like shocking for somebody who's been convicted of murder. It might happen for some lesser crime, or if they think their sentence is gonna be so short, like 6 months or something like. So for a long sentence, murder, really shocking. Some states give judges discretion. This was one of the states. But it's, yeah, like we've talked about, the unequal application of justice. This is a perfect example of that because and also the problem too is with an appeal, it can drag on for a very long time. You know, you have a speedy trial, constitutional right as a defendant. There's nothing like that for the prosecutors for the appeal. It could take a long time.
Yeah, and this is one of the challenges, right? People are outraged, not because bad cops exist, because truly there are bad people in every profession, right? It's because they are not held accountable. That's the issue. That's where the outrage connects. Okay, Ms. Doll, always a pleasure. Thank you for being on Indisputable. How can people follow you, check out your work?
Thank you so much for having me. They can follow me on Twitter, @DinaDoll1.
All right, we got more on the other side. The bullpen is next, stick and stay.
You know what the progressive movement needs? It needs a little energy, a little pizzazz, maybe a little caffeine. Oh, coffee. But what if it was Too Strong Coffee? Yes, new, toostrongcoffee.com/TYT. Look, this helps progressive causes. It's also organic and fair trade, so you've got peace of mind that it was done right, and it happens to taste great. So check it out right now at toostrongcoffee.com/TYT.
That's 300 million, that's a pretty good number, Well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world. We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks has just passed another milestone. 15 billion views. Damn. All right, lots of comments. You guys are the best.
I'm gonna read a few comments from our members.
Mr. Methuselah says on YouTube, super chat, thanks for all the important work you do for TYT for the movement.
Do you know who had the first super chat when I got back from vacation? You won't be surprised to find out. Rob Shively. What do you know? Rob says, rejoice for Dragon Daddy has returned.
This question sent to us by Izzy Sanchez Jr. Is it me or is Meghan McCain talking as fast as Ben Shapiro? Is that the way the right tries to look smart and intellectual? Well, yes.
Michael Nathan writes it on Twitter. Did Anna choose Cenk's outfit today? I'm sure it wasn't Cenk himself. Man Bun Jenkins Skinny Jeans says, so now Anna has pointed out, okay, that's his handle.
T. Joyce, 1971, saying Donald Trump is good at pulling out of things, NAFTA, the Iran deal, NATO. It's just too bad Fred Trump didn't.
All right, let me do a little quick plug here. It's not even a plug, I'm bragging, okay? I'm bragging, watch me. We have a channel on YouTube, a whole channel devoted just to the Young Turks. It's badass, right? Wow, man. I can see the void.
You guys are rock stars.
Unbelievable, Senator Sanders. Welcome to Rebel Headquarters. Man, you guys are amazing. We gave you what you wanted. Okay. Speaking of shirts.
I have a surprise.
You reached a lot of people. You are the Young Turks. And we have spread that progressive message wide and far. Let's keep it going.
Here's what we do. We go beyond the headline. We are willing to engage in transparent conversations with those who do not think like me. We also make sure that you know what's happening not only nationally, but in your local area. Make sure you tune in to Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Ritchie, Monday through Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time.
news, shoptyt.com now has books. There's a whole bunch of books there. You're gonna be shocked to find out that they're largely progressive. Of course! Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People, is there. It's fantastic. It's a story from Jesse Jackson to Bernie Sanders to AOC that explains the progressive movement probably better than any book I've ever read. Speaking of awesome books, my dad's got a book out called The Original Young Turk, where he goes from the poorest olive farmer you ever met in your life to living the American dream.
Welcome back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bullpen. In the Bullpen today, we have Mr. Jeff Charles, host of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. That is a podcast. And we're going to chop it up about left-leaning policies, right-leaning policies, and how they impact primarily Black America. Mr. Charles, thank you. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, brother. If you would, I don't want to presume what you know or believe about left-leaning versus right-leaning policies in America. So give us your sentiment and I will opine.
You know, when it comes to the Black community, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, because you have policies at the federal level, right, presidential level, but the vast majority of cities that are predominantly populated by Black people are run by Democrats, so they tend to be under more progressive left-leaning policies. I think overall, a lot of those policies haven't done very much for the Black community. I mean, these cities have been under Democrat control for decades, and you don't see much of a change in the standard of living. When it comes to conservative policies or right-leaning policies, I think that there is more room for benefit. I mean, we saw how Black people did under former President Donald Trump. Regardless of what you believe about him, Black people did fare better. When it comes to education, school choice, in areas where it has been implemented, has had a very big and positive impact on the Black community. So I would say, at least in those two areas, when you're looking at right-leaning policies, when they're carried out the right way, they do have a net positive impact for the Black community.
All right, it's good you feel that way, but that's untrue. And so I'm going to lay out some actual facts to you and let you deal with these facts, okay? So there was a survey, and the survey looked at left-leaning policies, compared them to right-leaning policies over a period of 30 years of respective leadership. What the survey found is that under Democratic policies, Black families' incomes grew an average of $895 annually, but only grew by $142 annually under Republican policies.
Are we talking about the federal level or at the local?
No, we're talking about, I'm talking about national numbers. So this is a national survey, and I'm gonna read the national numbers. Then I get into some granular data too.
Okay.
All right, but only grew $142 nationally under Republicans. The black unemployment rate fell by a net of 7.9%. Across 26 years of Democratic leadership, but it actually went up 13.7% during 26 years of Republican presidencies. Across the years of Democratic leadership, black poverty declined by a net of 23.6%, but it actually grew. Poverty in the black community has grown 3% under Republican presidents. Now, you talked about the economic or the employment prowess of the policies associated with Donald Trump. So let me provide some clarity to that. Do you know what system Trump used in order to promote his unemployment numbers?
When you say system, I'm not sure what you're referring to, so.
All right, so the numbers that when you say, black people did well as far as employment under Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump used what's called a U3 rating system. I want you to look this up when you get a moment. The U3 rating system only rates technical employment per 30 days of the survey model, which means if you work 1 hour in that 30-day survey, Donald Trump would count that as employment. The real rating system is a U6 rating system that he did not use. The U6 rating system provides contextualization to the numbers such as contract work, seasonal work, etc. Under the U6 rating system, black unemployment and underemployment was over 20%. But he utilized the U3 rating system so he could only talk about technical employment of black folk. Here's the other number they don't talk about. The household median income of black families dropped by $500 to $800 under Donald Trump. So you literally have more black people with technical connection to employment making less money overall. The third number they don't tell you about is the equal work for equal pay as it relates to people of color. Under the Obama administration, black people were starting to earn 70, 75, 80 cents on the dollar of what their white counterparts in a similar job or same job would earn. Under Donald Trump, that number then dropped back down to 67 cents on the dollar because he told his Department of Justice to not prosecute these discriminatory suits by way of the federal government to enforce workplace policy. They had a real cause and effect relationship to where now black people are getting paid less money. They have more technical employment, but they're not able to pay the bills. So brother, what I just laid out to you, none of those are my feelings. All of those are facts.
Well, when you're talking about U3 and U6, I will look that up and see what it is to which you were referring. All I know is that when I've read other reports on it, I've seen that black income did go up under Trump. Now, I'm sure that none of this was perfect. No policy is perfect, but the bottom line is wages did go up for the black community and the unemployment rate did get a lot better. Now, it was already on a downward track before Trump took over. But after he took over, that downward trend as far as unemployment, it accelerated as wages rose. Now, maybe when I have time to actually look at the U3 and U6, maybe we can have another conversation about this. I can't speak to that because I haven't actually read it myself. Okay. But when it comes to the reports that I've seen, report after report, even from left-leaning news sources, I am seeing that things did get better economically for the black community.
But wait a minute, brother. Come on, man. You can't say things got better economically for the black community when black people statistically earned less on the dollar than they did from under the Obama administration, and they had a lower household median income than they did before Trump got in, right? They had a lower household median income when Trump was president. Here's the other element that I think sometimes gets confused in the conversation of left-leaning policies versus right-leaning policies. First of all, they both get it wrong. All right, I don't feel left-leaning policies go far enough. And I don't think right-leaning policies are even in the ballpark, okay? But let's talk about one of the greatest ways to overcome generational poverty that still exists in America. Education, technical education included. That's one of the greatest ways to break generational poverty. Well, under Republican administrations, they tend to defund these programs by a tune of 50 to 80% depending on the region. While Democrats will properly fund, at least to the tune that's appropriate, still not to the tune that I think is perfect, but they will actually fund these particular programs that become catalysts to actual jobs in the marketplace, while Republicans would defund those programs at the same time in the same position. So tell me, brother, how was that a win for black people when those on the right will defund those programs that we both agree can actually end generational poverty.
I'm glad that you brought that up. The bottom line is, especially at the federal level, we throw a lot of money at schools, especially schools in inner city communities where a lot of black and brown kids get their education. However, we've seen that money being thrown and thrown and thrown, and yet there isn't much of a change.
But brother, I'm not talking about, in all due respect. Hold on, brother. I need to make a clarity here. You're answering a question that I did not answer. I'm not talking about K through 12 education. I'm specifically referring to higher education, technical training programs, college, etc. Those are the programs, Upward Bound, Educational Talent Search, Workforce, WorkSource. Those programs that allow adult individuals who come from historically marginalized communities to be able to go to welding school, to go to truck driving school, to go to AC repair, to go to college. Republicans historically defund those programs, while Democrats increase the funding of those programs typically.
So then the question I would have, because I thought we were talking K through 12 schools, so that's what I kind of boned up on. I didn't bone up on higher education, but then again,
but we never said in any of our notes that we're talking about K through 12 education, brother. All due respect.
Right, no, that's fine, that's fine. It's just usually when we have these conversations, we're talking about K through 12 when I've had other conversations. But if you're talking about higher learning, I would need to see that under Democratic rule, if they did fund those programs, that things actually got better, that we had more black graduates. I would need to see the numbers.
Black graduation increases. The record for black graduation was actually when President Obama was in office. You had a record black graduation rate in the United States. Are you gonna give Democrats or the brother any credit? I mean, you're talking about the numbers, brother. You can always research my numbers, fact check them, but you have a boom in African-American graduation.
And I'll say, if it turns out that Obama funding those programs actually resulted in higher graduation rates, I'll give them props. I have no problem giving somebody on the other side props if they actually do.
Can I ask you about HBCUs in particular?
Sure, I mean, when it comes to HBCUs, I mean, we saw what happened under the Trump administration. He provided a lot more funding for HBCUs. I know that the reason that they had last year that Biden was championing, they slashed a lot of that.
That is correct. So
Biden, I know you had a problem with that.
100%, brother. I said it on this show and my radio show. Biden is no friend to HBCUs. I have no idea how you got a whole vice president with the whole damn HBCU degree and you let them chump you off on the budget like that. I don't understand that. I stood against it. Also under Trump, which was the great fake out. He had this meeting with all these HBCU presidents and promised he would give them record funding. He never did that. He only renewed the funding as existed. He did not give them a record increase. That's number one. Number two, he then turned around and defunded Educational Talent Search. He defunded the federal TRIO program, which is utilized for HBCUs, and it's called Upward Bound and ETS in the budget line. Those are programs that I benefited from because they are targeted for historically marginalized communities and first generation college students. Well, Trump turned around and defunded that program. We had to fight to get some of the money back, while at the same time he's saying that he's going to give HBCUs more money than they have ever had. Lies, lies, lies. It was the talking point. You look under the hood of the car, brother, the engine don't match the make and model.
You know, Trump does exaggerate, he uses a lot of hyperbole, but the fact is, he still kept the funding going. He didn't make a promise saying, I'm gonna give you this much money, and then just like you said, we both agree with Biden, slash it later. So I mean, this is something where I think
but Trump did do that, brother. Listen, man, I get it, but here's what I'm challenging you to do. You see how I just called out Biden, had no problem doing that? That's because I'm free, brother. I'm free, all right? Trump did a very similar move.
Programs that you say he did, and I'll criticize him for that too.
Yeah, Trump did a very similar move. He also, you know, a lot of people bring up, well, Trump and his first step program, which was really a graduation of Obama's program. Okay, the problem with that program, when people say, well, that was his criminal justice reform, the problem with that program is that he only allowed it to apply to less than 1% of the prison population. Number one. Number two, he then turned around and defunded the very re-entry programs and halfway houses necessary for these men and women to be productive and to be reunified to functional society. So he takes that money away, he takes that funding away while screaming he's a reformist for prison reform. Come on, man, like you gotta see between the lines on this stuff.
I would have loved to have seen more done with the First Step Act.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure Democrats did. There were Republicans who did too. A lot of Democrats were on board with it. But I'm always going to want more criminal justice reform. So I don't necessarily disagree with you there. To me, I took it as what they said it was, the first step. I mean, we had it under Obama. We didn't. I mean, you said it was a continuation. They weren't able to get it past then. Maybe they would have gotten more when they passed.
Well, they had a version of it. It didn't go far enough. To the credit of President Obama, he did restore the federal Pell Grant under his limited powers through executive order. He made it a pilot program. We need to restore the Pell Grant for prisoners, because we all know that education is the greatest deterrent.
I wouldn't have any problem with that.
All right, thank you, brother. I appreciate you being on the show. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, don't forget about the conversation. Remember, take care of yourself, take care of each other, take care of the planet. Remember, the truth is always indisputable.